Welcome to the 14th season of the NitWits, a weekly roundtable discussion on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Our panel includes Neil Riddell of the Altoona Mirror, Mark Brennan of FightOnState.com, 1966 team captain Mike Irwin, and Casey Kantz of WTAJ Sports. The NitWits are brought to you by Irwin Financial, a firm foundation for your financial future. Coldwell Banker, no one will work harder to sell your home. By Doctors Howells and Reed, orthodontics for children and adults. By the bookstore in the Park Hills Plaza, featuring the area's most complete selection of books, DVDs, and magazines. By Fiore True Value on 6th Avenue, Altoona. Just ask rental. By Pacifico's Bakery, genuine Italian bread and rolls for your tailgating needs. By the Altoona Professional Hearing Aid Center, your hearing aid healthcare professional. By Monarch Cleaners, for all your cleaning needs. Your rehab choice, Health South Altoona. Ask for us by name. By J&P Auto, home of the $1,000 push, pull, or tow. By Courtesy Motors of Altoona, where courtesy means a great deal. By the Allegro, where fine cuisine is a way of life. By the easy-to-use Big Book. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State game day every Friday. You can also see the NitWits on AltoonaMirror.com.
And good evening to you. Welcome to the NitWits. You got the panel with you, Neil Riddell, Mike Irwin, Mark Brennan, guys. I've loved doing this show all year. It's been a great thing to do. I love talking to you guys, and likewise. But this is going to be a difficult one tonight with everything that's gone on this past week. It started back on Saturday with the arrest of former defensive coordinator Jerry Sandusky, athletic director Tim Curley, vice president of business and finance Gary Schultz were both arrested on perjury charges as well. And then Joe Paterno's weekly press conference in turn canceled on Tuesday. It was just a week of, just so much stuff going on. Then this team had to play a football game yesterday.
Obviously Joe and Graham Spanier then fired on Wednesday.
Exactly.
Mike McQuarrie placed on administrative leave Friday just to complete where we are.
It just kept going. It's just one thing after another, just a tough week, Neil.
Well, I mean, this is a tragedy. And I think all Penn State fans are grieving. I think all the adults, to some degree, failed. And I think knowing what they knew and had, that I can't criticize the Board of Trustees for what they've done. And I know we'll get to this later, but I think the whole university community took a step toward healing yesterday, but this will be a very long process.
And if we could clarify, if you watched the broadcast last week, it was obviously taped beforehand, so we are going to talk about this more tonight. But Mark, this past week.
Yeah, it was, we saw so many emotions and so many clearly we knew something was coming. I mean, once the news of the grand jury investigation into Jerry Sandusky broke last March, I think everybody realized that at some point we were going to hear something about charges. I don't think anybody realized the scope of this. I mean, to see 40 charges on a docket sheet, 20 plus of them felony charges, to know Tim Curley was charged with perjury, that this would ultimately lead to Joe Paterno being fired, I don't think anybody could have ever anticipated. These crimes, these alleged crimes, were horrific. They were terrible. One count is horrible. All of these counts, as you look at them, oh my goodness. I mean, it was just so difficult for people to digest, and I think that's why you saw the raw emotion. You know, some people rallying behind Joe. Some people, unfortunately, rioting, which this network or TV station had to deal with. Ultimately, as Neil said, this past weekend, I think it was a step in the right direction. To see the group prayer, the way the fans reacted, it was back to getting for people to be Penn State proud. It's going to be a long healing process, but I think it started this past weekend.
Mike, for someone who played, who has so many ties to the university, it's had to be so tough.
First of all, I think our prayers go out to all the victims. And, I was a teammate of Jerry Sandusky, and we were, good friends. And, I was as shocked as anyone, when I started reading this grand jury investigation, because, Jerry was like a role model to everybody, going through school and even after being a coach down there. Everybody looked up to Jerry, and I remember at his retirement getting up and telling everybody that he was a role model and you'd be proud to have him coach your kids. So, I guess you got to wait for the trial to come out to really finalize things, but it certainly doesn't look good for Jerry. And I know he claims his innocence, but I hate to see how this all plays out when they go to trial, if they go to trial. I think there's a lot of collateral damage at the same time to some of the people involved with the program. And, I think there's a lot of good people that have gone down with this. And we could talk about a little bit more of that later, but I have some definite opinions, on some of the methods that the people took to rectify the situation. So, we can talk about that.
Yeah. With everything that then transpired with obviously Joe losing his job later in the week, was this the right decision, the timing wise of what happened, Neil?
Well, you're dealing. First of all, this is the biggest story in our lifetime, and I think when Joe told the board to not worry a single minute about him, waste time worrying about him, that he will retire at the end of the year, I think he really backed the board into a corner at that point. And I just don't see how they, given the hemorrhaging that was going on 24/7, you could not turn your radio on or turn the TV on any network and not see continuous coverage on this. To allow him to retire on his own terms, which he probably was going to retire anyway.
Yeah.
I don't think they could have continued to allow him to be the face of the program. I don't think Joe could have stood up to the press conference that Tom Bradley was placed with on Thursday. But I think they were really left with no choice. Ideally, you would have liked to have allowed him to say goodbye. But I think this whole situation trumped that courtesy.
But I certainly don't like the way it was handled. Here's Joe, a guy that's given 61 years of his life, to that program, and to have somebody show up at his doorstep with a note to call in 15 minutes. I think Joe had his opportunity to talk to the board, or at least interview him at the board meeting. I don't know, and I agree with Neil. I think the deciding point was when he wrote a letter and said he's going to coach the 3 games and get out of there. He was taking control. But I still think they should have listened to Joe, because nobody really knows his side of the story yet. It's all innuendos and everybody making projections and forecasts of what's happened. And nobody really knows for sure what role Joe took in this.
Right.
I have trouble believing, they question his morality and what he did do. I have questions of whether he really just sat back and let this happen. I could understand he turned it over to his superiors and authority, but technically, can you go over their heads and start your own investigation, or what do you do at that point? So, there's a lot of questions. I'd rather hear it from Joe than to have people speculating.
Here, Mike, you're absolutely right. Joe does. If you're going to fire somebody who's done that much for a university, who's done that much for college football, regardless of what this mistake is, they should have done it face to face. Somebody should have been man enough or woman enough to look him straight in the eye and tell him why they were firing him. And at the time, they should have explained to the public why they were firing him. Having said that, this has been a public relations nightmare from the beginning. Listen, there is no way you're going to put a positive spin on any of this horrific stuff. But from Spanier coming out with a ridiculous statement saying Curley and Schultz had their unconditional support, from Joe putting out a statement through his son, which made no sense.
Three statements.
Yeah, then Joe's second statement through a PR flack. Then the way the board handled it, it was all terrible. Everybody's saying Joe didn't have an opportunity to speak. That it's true in that Graham Spanier told him he couldn't have his press conference. However, there are other places in State College that he could have spoken anytime he pleased. You have the most eloquent spokesman in college football history, or one of the most eloquent people in college football history, and he went down putting out prepared statements. If you're allowed to, if you can put out prepared statements, you could address the media, and he very well could have addressed a lot of this stuff, and then we would have had his story. We'll get his story eventually, and I'm anxious to hear it before I make final judgment, but he had opportunities to say what he needed to say.
But here's the thing. They then put out the third statement that a PR firm has or a lawyer has advised them not to speak. The second statement that Joe put out saying, I wish I would have done more, could increase all the damages of civil cases. So, I mean, they kept saying he wanted to talk, but I think anything that he possibly could have said would have made it worse.
But then don't put out prepared statements. If you can put out prepared statements, Neil, you should be able to talk. And I think that's what ended up. You either say nothing. You can't claim I can't speak, and at the same time you're putting out prepared statements.
Well, they certainly put a muzzle on him, and I think with all the liability the university has in some of these cases, they said, Joe, please don't say anything that could jeopardize the liability that they have. So I don't think anybody's going to really know until we actually hear from Joe and as this thing proceeds forward.
The bottom line is it's a shame that his career came to an end, and we did not have the opportunity to hear him. Now, ultimately, I think we will have that opportunity, and again, I think most people or anybody with common sense is going to reserve final judgment on him until he has a chance to speak for himself.
Let me just add one other thing. I think they should have put him on administrative leave rather than firing him, because I don't know if the Board of Trustees has any more facts than what we do. I mean, and then just to fire him like that after 61 years and say you're fired, I mean, you could put, and I think it would have been a circus down there on Saturday had he coached. But they should have let him on administrative leave until they sort out the details.
But that would have, in effect, well, that's a point, Mike, but then he probably wouldn't have coached the rest of this year anyway, and there would have been, we probably ought to take a break.
Let's do that. Just over 6 decades, Coach Joe Paterno was at the helm. He is now out. We're going to talk about his amazing legacy in just a little bit after this break.
The NitWits are brought to you by Irwin Financial, a firm foundation for your financial future. Coldwell Banker, no one will work harder to sell your home. By Doctors Howells and Reed, orthodontics for children and adults. By the bookstore in the Park Hills Plaza, featuring the area's most complete selection of books, DVDs, and magazines. By Fiore True Value on 6th Avenue, Altoona. Just ask rental.
All right, welcome back to the NitWits, talking more about Joe Paterno and the legacy he now leaves. Mike, I'll start with you. Again, you played for him, first captain under Joe Paterno. And obviously with what happened this week, very, very tough times, but there's no denying. You talked about it the segment before. There's no denying what this man's done for not only his team, how he's molded the men he's coached, and the community as a whole.
Well, I know the subject is talking about his legacy and whether this will tarnish his legacy. And when I look at the situation, I said you could identify individuals in your own mind. I mean, you're going to remember Joe as you knew Joe. And I think a lot of the people that have come to light this week, and I think specifically of Kajana Carter and Adam Talaferro, guys that he has nursed along, and all the other players there that he's helped academically and develop as people. I mean, that's the way I'm going to remember Joe Paterno. And this incident here, I mean, we're still, like we said before, a lot of facts to come out, but I think everybody has to think of Joe in their own context, how they do Joe. And obviously, if you were down there on Saturday, you saw that the university and most of the people I talked to have been very supportive of Joe Paterno. So, I mean, it's going to tarnish his legacy somewhat. But
I mean, I think that by staying until you're 84 years old, he always ran the risk of it ending on less than ideal terms, but nobody predicted these kind of terms. And I'm sad because I think he missed so many chances to get out when he felt good, really good, and everybody felt obviously a lot better about him. It clearly will taint his legacy. But I think you always remember the last thing, and as time goes on, I don't think it will overshadow everything that he has done. But I think, right now it is tainting his legacy in part because that's what it took to end his tenure.
Yeah, I mean, quickly, I think we have to see how this plays out from here before we can make any long-term judgments. I mentioned it earlier. How does this situate? What does he have to say when he has the opportunity? Does this become some sort of legal mess? I do think he has an opportunity to be remembered on the whole as a great coach, a great human being. This will have a negative impact, but I don't think we're going to be able to make final judgment on that until this situation plays out.
But as a coach, you're talking about a giant.
Yeah,
You're
absolutely.
talking about Rockne and Bryant and Lombardi and him being in that conversation.
Yeah, you don't forget about what he did for this university over the 61 years he's been here.
Well, that's it. I mean, to have one incident like this, and like Mark says, we don't know his story yet.
Right.
And the other guy, I mean, in this whole thing that I feel bad for is Mike McQuarrie. I mean, here's a guy that everybody's questioned what he did after that incident when he went there on March 1st of 2002. And who knows how they would act in that same situation. I mean, you go in and you're in a state of shock. Here's a guy that you grew up with his kids and you knew each other, and you're in a state of shock when you go in there. He calls his dad. He goes to the house. They show up at Joe Paterno's house the next day. And he's pasted down. He probably won't be able to get a job coaching anymore. And here's a guy that owned up for what he saw and as an honest guy. So who knows what decision they would make at that impact, when you have a 20-second shot or something.
And I think that speaks to a broader picture of how much national awareness, God forbid you ever see that. That you are in the state of shock. And this is a mentor and a coach and a family friend. But I think that this will tell all of us to know that we have to do more. It's like the movie, it's written about A Few Good Men. Well, we did nothing wrong. Why are we, and they said, well, we didn't fight for those who couldn't. And I think that applies in this situation.
We'll talk more about this. Got to get to a break, though. When we come back, we're going to talk about the scene in Happy Valley yesterday because, boy, an afternoon to remember, a tough afternoon, but a afternoon we will all certainly never forget.
The NitWits are brought to you by Pacifico's Bakery, genuine Italian bread and rolls for your tailgating needs. By the Altoona Professional Hearing Aid Center, your hearing aid healthcare professional. By Monarch Cleaners, for all your cleaning needs.
Welcome back to the show amidst such a tough week. Guys, a lot of memorable sights on Saturday. You had the empty seat left for Joe on the bus. You had the signs and the T-shirts of Nittany Nation all over the place. What do you take away from yesterday as a whole, Neil?
Well, I wasn't sure. I thought Penn State put their best foot forward, kind of like when the Virginia Tech shootings took place. You see the foundation. Mike, the former Letterman, 300 Letterman strong, just such a strong show of solidarity. The fans chanting, "We are Penn State" at the end. Nebraska, total class. Just
prayer session.
Yeah.
That was great.
How about the Penn State players through all this? I mean, they were put into a horrible, horrible situation. And for them to react to this the way that they have, Devin Still came up with the idea of coming out, arms locked, walking out. I thought that was so appropriate. Rather than charging out, it showed their solidarity, that they were reflecting on this awful situation. I just can't tell you, if you're a Penn State fan, it's been a terrible week. But you have a lot to be proud of in those players. I mean, the way they represent it in talking to the media during the week, before the game, after the game, they were amazing.
And I especially thought Tom Bradley did a great job handling this thing as an interim coach during this period of time. And I agree. I got an email from Rich Maudie about the Letterman getting together, and Rich has had two sons play on the team. And it is more than just Joe Paterno down there. All these Lettermen, even though Joe's been the example for 61 years, it's great. I mean, the people all hung together and embraced one another, and the Letterman and even the Nebraska football team coming on the field as one and saying some prayers together. And hopefully that we continue to remember all the abused children as the most important thing that's coming out.
I also thought Jay Paterno showed incredible poise in the face of all the media. I wasn't sure he would speak. He showed incredible poise. He really did.
Well, coming up, we wrap things up. We're going to talk about the loss to Nebraska, and we're also going to look ahead to Ohio State coming up this week. It's next.
The Nitwits are brought to you by J&P Auto, home of the $1,000 push, pull, or tow. By Courtesy Motors of Altoona, where courtesy means a great deal. By the Allegro, where fine cuisine is a way of life. By the easy-to-use Big Book. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State game day every Friday.
Welcome back to the Nitwits, guys. There was still a game to be played yesterday. Penn State got behind by 17, but as we've said throughout tonight's broadcast, they showed an immense amount of resilience and eventually falling, obviously a little short, 17-14. And it's really just not a team really equipped to come back from a 17-0 deficit, especially with everything that was probably on their minds playing that entire game.
Yeah, I mean, I thought maybe they had a chance to win the game, but looking back at it, given what they had gone through and the shakeups of the coaching staff, I think it's amazing they did what they did.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. You criticize them during the year, and we do grades and that sort of thing. And on this game, my overall thought is that I thought these guys to even be in that game. Mm-hmm. And come back the way they did. I thought it was a great showing by them. I'm sure everybody wanted them to win, but I think it was more important that they represented before the game, after the game, and it would have been great had they won it, but I give them credit for having a lot of heart.
Yeah, I thought they showed tremendous character. The Nebraska punter, I think, won the game.
Yeah.
I mean, he was phenomenal. Bombed a 61-yarder, really, with the game on the line. When there's so much emotion before the game, it's kind of hard to right away regroup and start to play. And Penn State's had a problem in the first half. There's 4 games that they haven't scored a touchdown in the first half.
Yeah.
2 in a row they've been shut out. The only thing that I was a little curious about late was it didn't seem a lot of urgency when they were down 2 scores and they were running and taking a lot of time, and then their short yardage offense failed. So that's something that they can build on going forward.
I thought with the circumstances we were going to pull something out at the end.
Yeah.
And we did rally back to get it to 17-14. We had our opportunities. We got the ball back. I agree with Neil. The play calling at the end of that game I thought was poor. I mean, a couple runs on a 3rd and 1 and a 4th and 1, and we don't make it, no element of surprise or urgency, I thought.
We got to get our picks for Ohio State, and we do have our Nitwit of the Week right here. You want to go first?
Thank you, Casey. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, I'd like you to go first.
Okay. I don't think Ohio State's that good. And I think now that Penn State will have a week, I mean, they're not told they had to reshuffle their coaching staff on the eve of a game. I think this will be a great test for Bradley in terms of, I like the fact they stuck with McGloin. Thankfully, they made that decision, not that he played that well. I'm going to say Penn State 22, Ohio State 17.
15 seconds, Mark.
I will go Ohio State 21, Penn State 14. I think it's going to be tough for them to go on the road with all this hanging over their heads.
Mike, quick.
I want to go Penn State 17, Ohio State 14.
I think it's been a tough week for Penn State. A lot still on their mind. I think they lose 23-17. With that, we're out of time. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you guys next week.
The Nitwits are brought to you by Irwin Financial, a firm foundation for your financial future. Coldwell Banker, no one will work harder to sell your home. By Doctors Howells and Reed, orthodontics for children and adults. By The Bookstore in the Park Hills Plaza, featuring the area's most complete selection of books, DVDs, and magazines. By Fiore True Value on 6th Avenue, Altoona. Just Ask Rental. By Pacifico's Bakery, genuine Italian bread and rolls for your tailgating needs. By the Altoona Professional Hearing Aid Center, your hearing aid healthcare professional. By Monarch Cleaners, for all your cleaning needs. Your rehab choice, Health South Altoona. Ask for us by name. By J&P Auto, home of the $1,000 push, pull, or tow. By Courtesy Motors of Altoona, where courtesy means a great deal. By the Allegro, where fine cuisine is a way of life. By the easy-to-use Big Book. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State game day every Friday. You can also see the NitWits on AltoonaMirror.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.